Today, I'm going to show you how to make a droid. I don't do motivators. For this build, I used foam floor mats, glue, and some other stuff. Power converters, kyber crystals, that sort of thing. Safety gear, scissors, razor pens, and a box cutter. First, I drew a circle onto a sheet of foam using my R2 body templates. Those are linked below, by the way. I decolored them while turning them into PDFs because the last thing I want to do is waste everyone's printer ink. Then, I cut it out with my razor pen. I traced and cut out smaller circles using an upturned bucket as a stencil. Hey, whatever works, you know? The color doesn't matter for this one because it's going to be on the inside, so I'm using a red sheet. Been doing a lot of builds with white foam lately, so I'm just trying to conserve it, you know? Watch this tomorrow, the hot new thing is the color of dull red EVA foam. Then I traced that onto white foam 3 more times. I cut those out roughly at first with the scissors, just so it was easier to work with, and then I refined the edges with the razor pen. Next, I glued the red circle to the larger gray one using hot glue. After that, I glued one of the white circles on top. Then I glued rectangular pieces of scrap foam vertically onto the white circle using hot glue, sort of like a clock face, or foam hinge. Once the hinge was finished, I transferred its measurements to a large 4mm sheet of foam and cut a strip from it. This is going to go around the outside of the hinge. As you can see, it's going to take more than one strip, but the seams are going to be hidden, so that's no big deal. So I cut another one. They sell 4mm foam in rolls, but this is just what I had in hand. I glued the strips to the foam and held them in place with machinist blocks for a few minutes until they cooled. When the circular wall was complete, I lined the exterior with vertical white frames. I'm using super glue for those because it's less likely to smoosh out around the edges than hot glue is. When they were all attached, I closed up the hinge with the second white circle that I cut. Then I used a leftover Stormtrooper brim template to make a thin curved piece to go around the outside of that, covering up the gray foam. I hot glued that and several more like it to the edge at a slight angle until the circle was complete. I covered the seams with DAP Alex Fast Dry. Chronologically, this step should come much later in the build. It should really be the second to last thing you do before you paint. However, it takes some time to dry and will need multiple layers, so I'm starting now because I know this is just going to sit around for a few hours while I work on the next piece. I'm not wearing a shirt here because I'm tired of destroying my shirts with this stuff as well as everything else in this shop. Everything in my shop destroys my clothes. So many t-shirts. What? My skin will just grow back, man. Doesn't work so well with hot glue though. Oh man, my ZF1. I got my worst ever glue gun burn with my ZF1. You know what, I'm just gonna make a suit of EVA foam armor, not for cosplay, but for shop work, just for safety, like a prop making hazmat suit. Where was I? Right, building robots. Let's get back to it. Next, I cut puzzle pieces from a strip of gray foam and glued it to the edge. You'll notice as I do this that the sealant seams aren't perfect. I'm pointing this out to let you know that in all likelihood, you're gonna have to do multiple applications before the seams completely erase. So don't be discouraged if it doesn't look pretty instantly, or just do better seams to begin with. Easy to say with hindsight, but a little late for that now. Once the circle was complete, I painted the rim gloss black. I'm protecting the white parts with blue painter's tape. Because foam is absorbent by nature, I had to do 3 coats. When it dried, I covered the edge with Rub and Buff metallic finish, which is not going to come out as shiny and chrome as a Daft Punk level metallic finish, but is perfect for the scuffed up dull aluminum Star Wars universe. Afterwards, I removed the tape. To complete the neck, I need to add detail to the black rectangles. I've seen people use lure tape, and that looks to be accurate, but I don't quite have enough, which, man, that's frustrating. It's like I have the right thing, but no time to get more. There's a bait and tackle shop around here, right? I live 5 miles from a lake. What am I talking about? Oh, but traffic's a nightmare right now. Whatever, I'm just gonna use screen door mesh. It's probably gonna cut down on lighting issues anyway, because lure tape is very similar to the reflective tape that I use for lightsaber blades. I cut out a bunch of rectangles and snugly pressed them into place. Next, I made the head using the third white circle as a base, and more curved pieces angled slightly up. Well, slightly more than the ones on the neck piece. You can see that 2 is not quite enough, but 3 is way too much. So really, like the templates give a lot of leeway. Okay, so I'm gonna attach these with super glue because there's really no need to do anything with contact cement. It really wanted to bow upwards, so in order to get it to lie flat, I glued down some wooden shims and weighted them down. I'm tempted to cut a wooden circle, but I want to be able to cut holes in the bottom of this, and that would get in the way. Okay, so that's much better, but you can sort of see that because these aren't connected, it's still wanting to curve the other way. Okay, so I'm going to do another cross beam just to finish flattening it out. Don't have a ton of time to get it perfect. There we go. you do want to hold it in place, because while it's settling before it's totally cooled, it could slide around on you. Next, I made the face. Now, I've done this type of droid before, just not to scale. So I pulled the shape off of my chopper droid using the foil and tape method. I built this like 8 years ago, and at the time, I was more concerned with getting it done than having it be perfect down to the millimeter, you know? So all the shapes are right, but the scale is off by a couple inches. So once I had that shape, I transferred it to cardboard and not only cut it out, but cut it down to size, which I'll have to do again after I transfer it to foam, but believe it or not, all this is much easier than starting from scratch. Next, I heat formed it. Because this isn't such a dramatic curve as a shoulder pauldron, I don't have to heat this up for very long before I roll it up and leave it in a tube to cool. With a piece this big, you want to let it cool in a large diameter pipe, because if it's squeezed too much, then the texture pattern from the back of the foam will get pressed into the clean side. After 20 minutes of cool down time, I glued that onto the base with hot glue. As you can see, this is only half of it, so I had to make another one for the back in exactly the same way. Okay, this is the second panel. I do actually want to point out that these holes are for reference. These are Chopper's eyes. This droid's eyes are a lot narrower. I attached that piece to the back of the head, forming a cone. This was too tall, so I cut a strip from the top. There are 3 small slots, or alcoves, around the outside, so I had to make 3 identical boxes out of scrap white foam. I cut holes in the end using a leather hole punch because they will eventually need to hold pipes in place. I glued the pieces together with super glue. When they were finished, I cut rectangular holes in the outside of the head and hot glued the boxes into the back of them. I weighted them down while they cooled. How many times have I said that line? At least twice in this build, 200 altogether. Next, I made the machine details that go into the alcoves. They're essentially pipes with different diameter segments. I took a wooden dowel that happened to be painted black already from a previous build and cut it into 3 pieces. Then I wrapped it in strips of scrap black foam in order to replicate that varying diameter. One of the pieces is supposed to be a gear, so I replicated that by cutting grooves into a 4mm piece of foam, wrapped around the pipe, and then heated it up with my heat gun to get the grooves to open up. Then I painted them gloss black. Finally, I gave them a top coat of silver rub and buff. Like all the solid stuff settled in the bottom. That's really all you can do to stir it when it's full. You don't want to use too much force on this because it could explode. These are very weak caps. God, it smells like kerosene. This is not a glowing review of this product. That's great, sure, why not? Wow, see how much shinier that is? I could leave that one because it goes on the back, but I think I'll recoat it. Rub and buff usually dries pretty quickly, within a few minutes, almost instantly really. I'm gonna set these up on a makeshift drying rack that totally isn't a machinist block, and just let those sit for a little while before I incorporate them into the droid. Notice I can't get into all the crevices when using my fingers like this, and that's giving the impression of built up tarnish, soot, dirt and debris, what have you. Space debris. All right, there we go. Nice. That'll be on the inside. Okay, now I am gonna wash my hands. Then I inserted the details into the alcoves. You'll notice the top of the cone is very deformed, so I have to refine the rim and insert an internal support so that it will hold its shape. I cut a circle, refined it on my belt sander, and placed it inside the cone head. I also cut a hole into it for easy access to the eyes, because I haven't yet placed them. See how well it's holding a circular shape now? Speaking of the eyes, I cut 3 of them using my widest leather hole punch, and I used a much smaller one to make the holes for the smaller eyes. Now that those are done, I closed up the top with a shallow cone. I made this by cutting an oblong circle, and then cutting a pizza slice out of it. When I joined the edges of the pizza slice together, the oblong base becomes a circle, and the center juts upward, becoming a 3-dimensional cone. I placed it into the top of the head, resting on top of the black circle. I trimmed the top edges to match the skull cap, and then I puttied the top seam. I made the eyes out of scrap PVC pipe and tape spools. I painted them black and waited for them to dry. When they dried, I found a few metal pens, which were perfect for the smaller eyes. I cut them up into enough pieces to fit in all the holes using my Dremel tool with a narrow bit. I mean, you could just as easily use a hacksaw, sort of overkill. Just if you're using the rotary tool with the narrow bit, wear eye protection, because those can shatter and they become shrapnel. Then I buffed the main eyes, inserted them, and then inserted the smaller ones, which didn't really need any buffing. For the antenna, I used random pipe fittings and a broken paintbrush. I gave it a coat coat of rub 'em both. Then I used painter's tape to make the designs of all the panels, basically doing it in reverse, and then using red paint to color in the white parts. I'm pretty sure in the actual movie, they just use narrow red strips of tape because they usually have really narrow masking tape on hand to put down T-marks, which tell the actors where to stand. When the red paint had dried, I removed the tape. I did have to touch up a few spots with white, but it's no big deal. Alternatively, with the Star Wars prop, you can hide mistakes by adding weathering to make it look like it's built up dirt or grease, grime, oil, and it won't look out of place, because that's just the look of that universe. When the head was dry, I stacked it on top of the net. Now for the body and the legs. So let's make more foam circles. If it seems like I'm rushing through this part, it's because I am. I've already covered it in my R2 build in entirely too much detail, and the red droid's body and legs are identical to R2's. In fact, the legs even have blue highlights, which I had never noticed before. And that's just a side effect of the movie business. There's a hero prop, R2, that gets all of the attention. And then the supporting props, which get much less attention, much less sophisticated parts, because they're only in a few scenes, or they're in the background out of focus. And the red droid having blue legs tell me those are spare R2 legs. You know, if they need 8 robots, and they're mostly the same, except a different color, then, you know, that saves an enormous amount of money. You don't even know. Plus, I can build so much faster when I'm not filming, it's crazy. When the body was built, I stacked the head on top to complete the droid, and that's how to build the red droid. Oh, by the way, I realized while setting this up that EVA foam is so light and the red droid is so much taller that I actually had to put lead tire weights in the body to keep it from falling over. Just a heads up. Thanks for watching, everybody. Hope you enjoyed this video. I had a lot of fun making it. I just want to take a moment to thank my patrons who are the reason why this video is possible. Those are the names scrolling by. They had a hand in making all that you see before you, well, not that one. Patreon didn't exist back then. Most of what you see before you. They're the ones who make it possible for me to do builds on the scale of life-size droids and working lightsabers, because the YouTube algorithm doesn't really like to promote prop builds. It likes to promote clickbait, and I don't want to make clickbait. Can I do a Picard facepalm if I'm dressed as a Jedi? I want to make speeder bikes and light cycles. Actually, a light cycle would be perfect for fighting a computer algorithm. That's what it's designed for. It's so that programs can fight on a cool neon game grid with extremely high stakes frisbee. So if you're a human and you don't want the internet to be taken over by weird CGI de-aged Jeff Bridges, then consider following the link below and joining these fine people to become a patron. Thanks for watching, happy crafting, see you later.